And now, without further ado, let's get right to number 50, one of the great what-ifs in NBA history, the great Bernard King.
Number 50, Bernard King.
He pairs quite nicely, like a wine with a steak, with number 49. We'll explain that in a moment. The accolades are the following. 2-time first-team All-NBA, 1-time second-team, 1-time third-team. He won a scoring title, averaging 33 points per game. He almost won an MVP that year in 1984. And so here's the deal. He averages 33, and then he suffers a brutal injury. Takes him a bit to get back. And then 6 years later, he's back up to 28 per game, but then he got hurt again. And this is back when you can't recover from injuries the way guys can now. And so he just didn't have he didn't have the longevity of some other guys, but his peak was incredibly high. So as you're going to see as we go throughout this list, and we'll talk about Bernard's playoffs in a moment, we're going to try to value everything, right? So a guy who was really good, but did it for 15 years, how do you weigh that against a guy who was great, but only did it for 8 years? Bernard King is obviously far closer to the latter than the former, but the other thing you're going to see is guys with light playoff resumes are penalized greatly. And Bernard King, he doesn't have a non-existent playoff resume, but it's a light one. So let me talk about what he did well. 1984, he did beat Isaiah and the Pistons. That Knicks team had no business beating Isaiah and the Pistons. He beat them. How'd they beat him? He averages 43-8 for the series. 43-8. He had 4 40-point games in that series. That same Pistons team that would a few years later, him up Michael Jordan 3 years in a row, Bernard King beat him. So that matters. Then in round 2, this again is pre-injury. It's his best year, almost wins MVP, does all these things. He plays Bird Celtics in round 2. So you have Isaiah's Pistons in round 1. You have Bird Celtics in round 2. Gets to a game 7 against Bird Celtics. Averages 29-5 in that series. Scores 44 in game 6, down 3-2. But they lose game 7. Suffers the injury. Again, so the playoff resume is really just that 1 year. But that's also the 1 year in the playoffs where he hadn't been hurt yet. So it does feel like he had amazing things to come. Never quite reached it because of the injuries. He's the 50th greatest player of the last 50 years. The great Bernard King, who, the way he explained how he scored, there were like 12 spots on the court he cared about. He just knew how to score from those 12 spots. He had 3 dribble moves he worked on, a dribble right, dribble left, dribble center. He would look at how you're guarding him and then pick the spot on the court he was closest to, pick the dribble move he needed to do, and that's how he would do it. Brilliant player, a big what if, the 50th greatest player ever. We have a question mark about one Bernard King, or a question from a caller, I should say. Let me hear it.
Not to be a millennial or anything, but who the hell is Bernard King, and why do you have him over Tracy McGrady? His shoes wasn't the best, but man, that boy could score. He could yam it. I'm just trying to figure out how Bernard is over T-Mizzy, T-Mac. Let me know, because I'm confused, bro.
So that's about Tracy McGrady. And Tracy McGrady is a great question because Tracy McGrady, spoiler alert, does not make this list. So his peak was incredibly high. He also, you could argue, was as good, as gifted of a scorer as Bernard King. So why does King make it and Tracy doesn't? Tracy was one of the hardest omissions. Because Tracy's lack of a playoff resume is even more glaring than Bernard King's. Tracy made the playoffs a bunch and never gets out of round 1. And if you go through it, it's not great instances on him not getting out of round 1. There's a lot of game 7s and it's not great performances. So most famously, he's up 3-1 on Detroit, in round 1. They not only lose the next 3, but he's 8 of 20 in game 5. He's 7 of 24 in game 7. Now he's really good in game 6, but they lose by 15 despite it. That's not great. The next time he's in the playoffs, another game 7, a series against Dallas. This time he's with Houston. He's 10 of 26 in that Game 7. They lose. The next year, 2 years later, he's in the playoffs again. Another Game 7. This one against Utah. He's not bad. Don't get me wrong. He's not bad in the Game 7. He has 29 and 13, but they lose by 4. But the problem was they were up 3-2, and in Game 6, he's 8 of 23. So McGrady, the playoff stuff, in my opinion, just kills him. He just misses out. And so that's why he's not on the list. Hey, thanks for watching. Hit the subscribe button to get more from the show, and make sure to click the bell to get notified every time new content drops. Check out full episodes of What's Right wherever you get your podcasts, or just click the link in the description below.